I've stalked this sub for a while, and couldn't decide whether or not to post mine, but I'm feeling brave on a Monday. It was a very long time ago, back in 1973. I know it was summer, I was 6, and we were living on Monica Lane in Madison, Wisconsin. Thing is, I sort of recalled it, but never put 2 and 2 together, until a few months ago when I was talking to my mom. I was a very gregarious child, outgoing, extroverted, friends with anyone. It was at the time a middle-class neighborhood, and 3 houses down from ours on the same side of the street was a huge park. My mom was a nurse, and my dad was a salesman, but Mom worked second shift at Meritor, while my dad worked days. I rarely had a babysitter, only if they went out for dinner or a movie, but they did go out often, and there were always older kids in the neighborhood to babysit. One sitter who I really liked lived a few blocks or so away, and down the street a little bit. Vicky had babysat a few times before that, and it was pretty uneventful. She'd play games with me and do my hair, play dress-up, pretty basic stuff. So anyhow, one day I had gone with my friends down to the park. I remember there was a ball field at the time, and a sandlot next to the field. My friends wanted to play on the monkey bars, but I wanted to play in the sand. I looked at the sandbox, and my babysitter Vicky was standing there. I told my friends I was going down there and ran off. We played in the sand for a while, building a castle, and then she asked me if I wanted to go get something cold to drink. It was stifling hot, and I, of course, said yes. She takes my hand and we start walking over to her place. She starts telling me about her puppies and asking if I wanted to play with them. Of course, I get giddy, and now I can't wait to see her house. And this is where my memory had stopped, and after my mom told me what had happened, the rest of it flooded back. My mother just happened to be talking to my sister and I about some of the places we lived, and we got to Monica Lane. I told her I remembered the park and how big it seemed, and she asked me if I remembered being kidnapped. I immediately thought she was kidding, but the look on her face told me otherwise. She said it was around 5 in the afternoon, and one of my friends had come to my door to ask me to come back outside, sure that I had gotten bored and walked home. When my mom checked the house, she realized I wasn't there, and 7 months pregnant with my sister, she sprinted to the park screaming my name. After asking several kids if they'd seen me with no clue, she went to the baseball field and asked the older boys if they'd seen me. One of them, who seemed to be around 14, said that he'd seen a younger woman playing with a girl that fit my description in the sand, and then we walked off in a general direction, and that's all he knew. My mom ran across the street to one of the houses and asked to use their phone and called the police. By the time they got there, my dad had come home, and some of the neighbors were trying to help my mom look. So there's this search party out looking for me, screaming my name and knocking on doors. The police had gone back to the park to ask the boys if they knew who had been with me, and if they knew who she was. Between the boys and the neighbors, they had somehow deduced who it was that had led me off, but I have no idea how, honestly. The police and the entourage go to her home. She lived with her parents, but they weren't there, and knock on the door. She came to the door and told them that she hadn't seen me, and that she'd been home all day. The police asked to come in, and for some reason, she said okay. They went through the house, and went to the basement, and found me. That's what my mom knew, and then I remembered. It was literally like a floodgate had been opened, and I started crying. At 6, you just sort of trust everyone, and she'd been in our home before. I never got a bad feeling from her, and my parents didn't either. But when we walked into her house, I remember that cold, holy fuck feeling washing over me, and getting very worried. I remember starting to cry, and telling her that I wanted to go home over and over. She takes me into her kitchen, and gets me a glass of water and a tissue. I hear dogs barking, and next to the kitchen is an open stairway that goes down where the barking was coming from. She starts trying to cajole me into going downstairs, telling me there's all sorts of neat toys and games. I reluctantly agree, and she grabs my hand and starts leading me. The dogs are going nuttier, and I start screaming, At this point, Vicky's getting fucking bizarre. She's screaming at me, "Shut the fuck up! If you don't shut up, I'll throw you in the cage with the dogs and they'll fucking eat you!" Dragging me down the stairs while I was still screaming. I was scared out of my mind. I remember crying so hard that I was hyperventilating, and I was screaming so hard that I wasn't making any sound. She flipped the switch and started being syrupy sweet, trying to calm me down. She tells me that she was just playing a game, and tells me that she wants to play hide and seek. She must have been relatively skilled at calming me down, because the next thing I know, I hear knocking on the door upstairs, and I wasn't crying anymore. The houses were all the same sort of tract houses that Sears used to sell. Not huge, but not small either. You could hear pretty much everything in every spot in the house. I keep hearing the knocking, and she tells me that they're her friends. They're coming to play hide and seek, and she convinced me to let her put a piece of masking tape over my mouth so I wouldn't make any sounds. She lifted me into a big wooden box next to the kennel, put a big pile of blankets over me, and told me to be really quiet so they wouldn't find me. The whole time the dogs were going batshit, but when she calmed me down, they calmed down too. They still looked pretty mean, but were no longer frothing at the mouth, only slightly growling, until the knocking started. I remember scrunching in there confused, still scared, and convinced that the dogs were going to get out and eat me. I was crying again and hyperventilating. I remember taking the tape off my mouth because I couldn't breathe, but remembered I needed to be quiet because I was afraid of what she'd do if I screamed. I laid in that smelly box next to a big bag of dog food, sweating to hell with tears rolling down my face. I sort of pushed the blankets to the side, but only enough so that I could pull them back over me when someone came. I recall thinking about my dad and wondering if he'd come to save me. All of a sudden I hear what sounds like adults yelling my name. And they come down the stairs, and the dogs are going batshit again. Over and over, men are yelling my name, and then I hear a man say, "If you don't shut those fucking dogs up, I will." I was in a large storage box with tape hanging off of my mouth when they opened the lid. I remember a nice man asking me my name and if I was okay. I don't remember answering him in anything other than screams and tears, grabbing his neck so hard my dad had to practically pry me off of him. My parents took me to the hospital to be checked out, and that's all I really remember. Mom said that Vicky was found guilty of attempted kidnapping, and last she knew was in prison, but couldn't remember the last time she had heard anything. We moved from the area shortly thereafter, and I'd never been back since. I do know that Mom said her parents were odd, but that they didn't know them. She had met Vicky from neighbors that had used her as a babysitter, and had never heard anything bad. I always seemed happy with her. She lived in the general neighborhood, but it would have been 2 blocks over and a block down. Mom said they never picked her up. She always walked over. When they'd get home, they'd drive her home, but never noticed anything out of the ordinary. Mom and Dad had only met her parents when they came to the door to beg for forgiveness, that Vicky hadn't meant to do anything bad and was a good girl. Mom said my dad picked up her dad by the shirt and told him that if they ever came on our property again, he'd kill them. I remember her name and sort of what she looked like, but if she walked up to me today, I'd have no idea who she was. To begin, I'd like to say that I'm a male in my mid-20s. When I was in high school, I weighed 305 pounds, but eventually lost all the weight. Now at 140 through dedicated scheduling of exercise and eating habits. Since then, I frequently go on a walk or jog depending on how I feel. Usually, that pertains to me simply doing this activity in my neighborhood. I'm sure many can attest to doing this regularly. It can become very tedious going on the same route and seeing the same old scenery constantly. Like clockwork, I was getting ready to begin my workout, but that night I decided to change locations. On this particular day, I thought I'd head to the closest playground near my house, which is roughly a 5-minute drive away. This area features a paved circular trail that's about a mile in length. In the middle sits the playground itself. When I arrived, nothing was necessarily peculiar. There were parents with their children, and you could hear the enthusiasm from everyone. Most of the parking spots were filled, but I managed to find a decent spot that was close to the starting point for the trail. Next to me, however, there was an older gentleman sitting in his vehicle, watching the adults and children play. At first, I didn't think much of it or even consider it unusual. I chalked it up to me having just pulled into the parking lot and this person having just gotten into their car and was probably ready to leave. Either that or something else innocent. At this point, I'm still sitting in my vehicle, texting a friend of mine who wanted to hang out. We agree on having dinner at Applebee's once I finish my workout. This back and forth conversation lasted approximately 5 to 10 minutes. All the while, this male individual in his car next to me was still adamantly focusing on the children playing, his attention transfixed on their every move. From that moment forward, I had a lot of suspicions and theories as to what this person might be doing, and many alarm bells started ringing in my head. Within that time frame, some parents were leaving the park while others maintained their play. As usual, I got out of my car, locked my doors, and put my keys into my pocket. I turned the music playlist on my phone and set it to shuffle, and began my walk. Being as the trail is a circular formation, I went counterclockwise from my perspective. When I was a little over a quarter mile on the walk, though, something compelled me to look behind me just to see. Noticeably, the remaining parents and children were now starting to leave the area. Nevertheless, the stranger that had parked next to me was still in his vehicle. Once the rest of those in the park were officially gone, leaving just me and him, that's when this male individual decided to get out of his car. For whatever reason, he walked around to his passenger side, opened the door, and appeared to take something out and put this object in his pocket. When he closed the door, he stood there for a brief moment, looking inside my driver's side window. Of course, I knew that trouble was on the way then in some form or another, and I prepared myself for what could possibly arise. The man started to walk the trail as well. However, instead of following my direction, he went the opposite way, knowing that our paths would cross unless I turned around. Truthfully, it was pretty intelligent of him. He seemed to know what he was doing. Although I still had my headphones on, the music was completely muted. As we were both getting closer to one another, I took my car keys and tightly held them in my palm, with the largest key stored in my knuckles like a knife. I was quite surprised on this stranger's stature. He was fairly tall, roughly 6'4" possibly, and incredibly stocky. His attire could be perceived to be that of a factory worker, with steel-toed boots and a rugged pair of jeans with a heavy denim jacket. Once we were about 5 feet away from each other, I shit you not, he took his hand and grabbed his cock and balls and said to me, "Hi," with this eerily sarcastic expression. Nothing violent took place then. I responded with one of those little head nods of acknowledgement, but also a disgusting face. I ignored his attempt at conversation and tried to continue walking. When I was 10 feet away or more, the man suddenly shouted, "Hey!" It had a tone of anger. I turned around and said, yeah?" The man started slowly walking towards me, smiling. Now, one of his hands were in his jeans pocket, and he asked for my name. Obviously, I lied and said Peter. While he's walking towards me, I was backing up simultaneously. Then he asks, "How are you today, Peter?" I just tell him that I'm good and continue backing away, but he keeps trying to insist on having a conversation. With his hands in his pants pocket and still making his way into my direction with that strange grin, he asks, "Hey man, you want to smoke a joint? Let's go to my car. I have any type of drug you want. How about you come take a look and see what you like?" I gave one of those sarcastic laughs in reply, also telling him, "Nah man, I'm good. Thanks though." Now I'm officially walking away from the entire scenario and took the chance of turning my back on him. My headphones were muted in order to hear possible footsteps, but nothing seemed to happen. I was about 30 feet away, and as I peeked back, the man was still standing there. One of his hands was on his crotch again, and the other was sincerely waving back at me. And yes, he was still smiling. When I was near 3/4 of the way done with the walk and much closer to my vehicle, I glanced back to see where he was. Shockingly, he was still standing in the exact same place from where our albeit one-sided conversation took place. Again, his posture remained the same. Afterwards, I left the park and thought that was disgusting and hoped I'd never have to see him again. A month or two goes by, and that day at the park had already been forgotten and put in the back of my mind. I had to go to the local grocery store to pick up a few items for dinner later that evening. Once I got all the necessities I needed, I went to the electronics department to see if there were any decent Blu-ray movies. When I got to the movie section, sure enough, the same man from the park was already there. Personally, it was more than likely just happenstance, but I made an attempt to leave that particular department without giving the notion that I saw him. Since I was at the store already, I made my way to the complete opposite side from the electronics department to surprise my son with a new Batman toy. Somehow, minutes later when I'm getting ready to pay, the man ends up spotting me. When I did, I noticed as well that he stopped for a short moment and was gazing at me. I tried ignoring the entire ordeal and to leave the store as rapidly as possible. Of course, all the checkout aisles were packed and busy, and since this is Walmart we're talking about, only 4 or 5 lanes were open. I felt uncomfortable waiting in line to pay, knowing it would be possible for this man to get behind me, or say or do God knows what. I took my shopping cart and trekked back to the electronics section, since the man wasn't there anymore. Go figure, he started trailing me. Although we both knew we were in the store, I don't think he recognized that I caught a glimpse of him following me this go around. And because of this, I made the decision to play cat and mouse to properly make sure he was tailing me. When I arrived at electronics, he too was close by. I didn't remain long, and this time I went to hygiene, where the deodorant and body wash was. Nevertheless, the man seemed to casually walk near me, as if I weren't noticing. Even though he was stalking me, a part of me wanted to still consider this nothing but a coincidence. And this time I made a destination for the clothing aisle. Once again, he was there. From here, now that I was wholeheartedly convinced the man was watching and following my every move, I took my phone out, turned the camera app on, and pressed the option key to have the camera start facing my direction, as if I was going to take a selfie. I propped my phone up in my cart and tried concealing its vision, but having enough opening to see someone behind me. And this time I went to lawn and garden. As he was following me, I was able to get a good visual on my phone. Since holidays were coming soon, this area of the store was being worked on by employees. Due to it being particularly busy, I managed to escape, maneuvering in and out of various aisles without him knowing. When the timing was right, I made my way to the nearest checkout. Despite the immense amount of inconvenience this man was causing me, everything went pretty smoothly. When I got home, I looked at the footage I had recorded. Obviously, it was strange, but a bit humorous as well. What caught my attention was the man's demeanor in the lawn and garden area of the store. After escaping his stalking, the video captured him walking each aisle trying to find me, peeking down each row in hopes of seeing me. He seemed quite confused and angered by my presence not being there. Out of curiosity, I uploaded the video to social media, explaining the situation I was facing with the man. Luckily, I had a few replies from other locals who said that they knew the person and that he'd done this degenerate act multiple times before to other people. Furthermore, he was registered as a sexual offender and not allowed to be at any of the local parks in town. I was informed that he was incredibly dangerous and that I should call the authorities immediately. It's been a few years now since this unfortunate occurrence, and nothing has happened since. Sometimes I'll get online and visit our local police website, where it features a comprehensive list of current jail inmates, just to see if he's where he belongs. But other than that, I've never seen him again. This is a story that I was told by my mother when I was old enough to understand what had almost happened. I was only a few weeks old, and in those days when a mother had given birth and taken their baby home, midwives were sent from the hospital. It was mostly to check on the baby and mother once or twice a week at max. My dad was working, so he wasn't home, and my mother had put me to sleep and was going about her business in the house. These visits were only every week or so, and she had just had 2 midwives come in the morning. It was one day before, so she knew immediately what had happened next wasn't okay. She heard a knock at the door, and so went to open it. We lived in a close-knit community, and there was rarely any threat to safety around there. Most of the people who lived nearby worked the whole day, as they were young, healthy couples, so it was deserted at that time of day. My mother was greeted by a male and female, who were dressed in midwifery outfits, with hospital badges and a very polite welcome. They asked if they could come in. They explained that they had been sent by the hospital to check on her and the new baby. My mom let them stay in, as they had all the professional clothes and badges, and knew when my mother had given birth and all those details. They even knew she had a little girl and my mother's name. Very convincing, but also all info that's pretty easy to access. The male said that he was going to take me upstairs and check over me, and the female would check over my mother downstairs. However, my mother didn't feel okay about them wanting to separate us. She explained that a pair of midwives had already been that week, and said that she was going to ring the hospital to check. Nobody had notified her that they were sending more on the way just a day or two after. She also warned that her husband, my dad, was on his way home from work, and he probably wouldn't be too happy about this. At this point, the pair got very defensive and said they would leave after being really pushy with my mother to separate the two of us. Finally, she got them to leave, but they quickly changed their behavior to being calmed down and said not to worry. They told her it must have been a mistake and to not bother checking with the hospital. They said it must have been a mistake, and to not bother checking with the hospital when my mom was calling them. What was even weirder is that when my mom opened the door making them leave, there was another person waiting in a car outside, who had the engine still running. When they left, my mother, scared, rang the hospital, who said they had not had any midwives scheduled to visit me and my mother that day. They also said that they always alert the mother if they're going to send them, and they said they would never ask to separate the mother and the baby. They asked for descriptions of the midwives, and said that they didn't have a male midwife at the hospital where I was born, and told her to immediately contact the police. Terrified, my mother called my dad, who came straight home, and they reported it to the police, who took a description, but it never amounted to anything that we know of. Who knows what those pair were planning? It's so creepy that they had gained access to all the information that my mother had recently given birth. They must have been watching the house to know my father wasn't home as well. They had even gone through the effort of having authentic uniform and badges made. Thank God my mother acted on her instinct and got them the hell out of the house and stuck to her guns. It's even more creepy to imagine what my life would be like now if they'd got to carry out whatever they were planning. I don't believe it could have been a genuine mix-up. They'd not followed standard protocol in warning my mother they were visiting. They were very insistent on separating the two of us, and they were rude and defensive when my mother challenged them. This is all not acceptable behavior from a health professional. I believe we were lucky that they left without a fuss eventually. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback in the comments below, as well as perhaps like, share, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have a personal story that you'd like to submit, or you'd like to just send me a message, links to all of my social media will be in the description for the video below. This includes my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the theme of the story is, if it has any, the name of the story, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious at all about the music used in this video, the music is always listed in the description below, in the order which it appears. I also have links to the artists and list the tracks by name, just in case you want to find more of their work. Last but not least, if you have any criticism, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.